Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where we throw out the old blueprint so you can become who you were always meant to be. I'm your host, Jason Smith, and if you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this podcast with your friends on social media and tag me in it at JBirdFit. Today, I have a very special guest for you, Jessica Baum. Jessica is the author of Anxiously Attached and the upcoming book, Safe, Coming Home to Yourself and Others, out October 28th. Jessica's work bridges neuroscience, attachment, and real human experience, helping people understand why we chase the unavailable, how our nervous system keeps us stuck in the familiar, and what it actually means to feel safe in our own bodies again. In this conversation, we get into the power of anchors, interoception, and the process of coming home to yourself and to the relationships that can finally hold you. Jessica, welcome back to the Blueprint Podcast.
So happy to be here with you. I'm excited for the conversation.
So I put the books in front of me for a reason, and I want people to be able to see the covers. This is something that I don't think a lot of people really talk about, but it's such a huge piece of writing a book and getting it out there for the masses. When we look at all the attachment books that are out there, they're like red with gold accents and silver, and we tend to look for like the colors of love. And I just love that, first off, the colors are so bright and it's inviting, and it's saying that we can still be playful, we can still have fun. There's a bit of childlike wonder within the books that I pull from this with the hearts and the different colors and then the paper hearts on Safe. I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit about the selection of the colors, and maybe is there a meaning behind the paper heart in the center?
Oh my God, I can't believe you're starting with this. I really struggled with my covers because my books are scientific and serious and the content is so serious, but I had to really trust my publishers. And I remember when Anxiously Attached came out, first it was yellow, which I had a meltdown about, and then changed it. And then it became like such a book that people gravitated towards. And I was like, wow, I really do need to trust my publishers. And so then when Safe came out, I was like, oh, I'm going to be known as like the paper cutout girl. That's hard when you study interpersonal neurobiology and like you geek out on the brain and the body and the trauma. And then I was like, no, this is so accessible, so grabby. Like you said, like pops. I love the color of it. And I just had to work through that. And I think as an author, when you get traditionally published the way I did, there's so many benefits. And one of the benefits is they do the market research. They try to figure out what the public is and they know more than I know. So I had to trust them. And I love this it's actually, yours is orange, but it came out like really like coral. And I love it. And
I like that.
Yeah. And I wanted it in that orange. And then it ended up coming out in this orange. And I'm like, they know better than I know. So I got to just let them do their job.
Now, I will say, you talk a lot about inner child healing, and I really feel like those paper cutouts lean into that aspect of it, and that's where the invitation really comes in, to look at this more seriously and to do the work, but to do it with that childlike wonder that we're capable of working on ourselves in a way that allows us to be more expansive in our expression and how we show up. And then even like you say on the front of the book, it's about coming home to yourself and others. And I'm really curious what that phrase means to you.
Yeah, another really good one. So when I was first writing the book, a lot of this book is around implicit memory and attachment wounds and getting in touch with our earliest experiences and how they overlay in our current relationships. And I have a relationship that I open up with in this book where I describe my first hug to him as feeling like I was at home for the first time. And the irony is he represented the attention and the love that I didn't get from my childhood home. But he also later in the relationship, years later, awakened earlier sensations and experiences that literally brought me in to the embedded contact of my earliest memories of home. So there's a lot that goes into that. And in the book, the middle of the book, you learn interoception, which we can talk about, but somatic practices about coming home to the felt experiences that live inside your body, which is where attachment wounds are stored. So the idea of home is pretty loaded because we usually attract people who are familiar and ironically and tragically sometimes repeat the familiar patterns that we've experienced from our childhood home. And part of SAFE is working on becoming very conscious of that so we can get out of these trauma bonds and these cycles and start to heal at the root of what happened in our home so whether or not we're recreating it in our adult life.
It's so interesting because that's one of my favorite questions to ask clients is you often hear they'll say, this relationship was amazing. They're such a perfect person. And they swiped right and they did the Google searches and they looked them up on LinkedIn and they broke down all this information and they created a bit of a story about the person. And they move on weeks into the relationship and they find themselves saying that statement, this person feels like home. And for me, that really becomes a sign and signal to pay attention in the early stages of dating because you can ask yourself, how was home? And we get to look back on that experience with a different set of eyes when we use that power of the pause to step back for a second and allow ourselves to sit within that feeling that we're experiencing and really dive into that. And that's that awareness piece that I think is, number one, it's the first step, right? But it's also one of the hardest. So how can somebody step into that level of awareness with meaning and the felt experience behind it?
Yeah, essentially that's what SAFE does, but it's a process of, I talk about the wheel of attachment, which we can get into, but it's a process of getting in touch with what our experiences in our body of each person that we were close to in our earliest environment and how that connection and our way of relating and our attachment, basically adaptations with each of these primary people in our home live in our body now. So I talk about these early imprints and all of them imprinting in us and how those get reenacted later in life in our adult relationships. So getting conscious of them. But first we have to go to the original paradigm, the original environment. And most people are pretty disconnected from their body. I was too. I talk about that in great depth. Left shifted. I was like a workaholic, disconnected from my sensational world, from our implicit memory, which is connected to attachment wounds. So a lot of the book and a lot of the work is shifting into the right and developing something called interoception, which is an ability to listen to streams of information that are going on in our body, to understand the sensational experiences that are going on in our body and our gut and our heart, and understanding how they relate to our attachment wounds. So in that process, we can start to awaken to what our embodied experience is. And that's part of the healing process that SAFE provides, is this journey towards healing your attachment wounds.
And what if we don't have the language in the moment to be able to identify what it is that we're really experiencing within our body?
Yeah, it's not, yeah, the language is sensational. So if you're listening, that would be building interoception, like a tightness in my chest, a queasiness in my stomach, tension in my muscles, and like starting to get, it's not just the language. Some people don't have the neural linking to what sensations are in their body because their parents didn't mirror that and didn't develop that capacity, mostly because their parents didn't have the capacity themselves. So we didn't inherit the ability to have this interoception ability. So we have to actually cultivate it and work on it. And I even work on it in Anxiously Attached. A lot of the meditations are about going into the heart space, going into the body, starting to meet the sensation. And so SAFE just takes it 5 levels deeper. And we start to understand that sensation that lives in the body is attachment wounds. But before we can get there, we have to start to slow down and just try to start to be with what's in the body. And we usually need to do that with an anchoring a relationship. Sometimes it's really hard to do that unless we are in the safety of someone who is helping us even get in touch with what's going on inside.
That's a really great segue into what is an anchor?
Yeah. And this is such an important concept. And I think this makes me feel like I was like 19 years old when I talk about Anxiously Attached, being in the hospital and like figuring out that I was like codependent. And I read every single self-help book that I could get my hands on, thinking that I could heal myself. I wrote 2 books on it, and I do feel like I've healed a tremendous amount. But when you really start to understand interpersonal neurobiology and attachment wounds, you really understand that what was wounded in relationship needs to be healed in relationship. And so when you really understand how the body stores attachment wounds, how neural nets open, how a state of safety in our ventral nervous system of sharing is how we start to get in touch with what is in our body, move it up through our streams up to our right hemisphere and integrate it into our left, we start to understand that we need people, we need connection, and we need a certain type of person or people in our life in order to heal. And so I don't want to say that it has to be a therapist, because truly some therapists don't have this capacity, and it doesn't have to be a therapist, and not everybody can afford to go out and invest in years and years of therapy. But it does need to be an anchor, or hopefully you can find many, and we can talk about how most people don't have any, but is a person who can hold space non-judgmentally. Their nervous system is in a state of safety, so they can hold your dysregulation. They are not trying to fix you. They don't have an agenda, and they are just holding that space while you do the work. I talk about co-anchoring and how you can do this with other people, but it's very important that we find our anchors. And I do know that a lot of people listening are going to be like, oh man, this is so hard. I might not have an anchor. And I face that all the time with my clients. But it only takes one anchoring relationship to change the trajectory of your relationships and start to heal the nervous system patterns so that you can reorient to what that feels like. And once you start to understand what it feels like to be in an anchoring relationship, we can start to heal the attachment wounds, and you will start to attract more available, capable people once it happens.
It's really difficult. I had my first experience as an adult with being witnessed fully for the first time and then not rejected. What an amazing experience that is if you've never had that, or you don't have access to these types of anchors in your life, because a lot of times we connect with the people that are very much like ourselves. It's that familiar home that we're so used to. So this is going to be your friend groups and other people that you hang out with, familial and otherwise, and you find yourself in this place connecting with these people. Sometimes you get rejected in the process when somebody doesn't necessarily align with that, and then we take it personally, and there's all these internal experiences that are happening. So when you don't have that anchor right now in this moment, how can you reach out and find an anchor for yourself?
Yeah. So it's such a sensitive topic. And I talk about in the book inner and outer anchors. And one of the things we can do is resource an anchor that we had at some point in our life. So our anchors are important to have, real life anchors in the here and now as we do this work. But there might have been a teacher, a pet, a friend. For me, it was my grandmother. There might have been experiences in our life of secure attachment, which is what an anchor is. And we can go back and cultivate the felt sense of what it was like in their presence while we do the work, and also look for that as we start to feel into it in our Rolodex of people. And sometimes you're not even thinking that it's this aunt or this friend that you had, or there was a connection at some point that was really warm and welcoming to you and might be available to you. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Often with my clients, when I start working with them, it's like the felt experience of our relationship starts to deeply shift their nervous system. And I'm like, this holding and this showing up for you and this emotional availability, which might be new for you, let's pretend that this is love and that this is what you didn't get. And as they start to receive more and more of that, their system starts to expect more and more in that. And ironically, as we receive more and we expect more, we usually attract, or we can orient more towards that type of person moving forward. And we will likely move away from people who don't have the capacity. Because what happens in a trauma bond or when we get stuck is that we keep going back to the same person who is emotionally unavailable, expecting them to have the capacity to fix us, to hold us, and we re-injure ourselves over and over. And we're all capable of this. I definitely did this myself. And that person maybe in the beginning of the relationship had the capacity, but due to their wounding and their adaptations, can't show up in that way anymore. But yet we keep trying and we keep trying. that can really mess up your nervous system in a lot of ways. So what the book really teaches you to do is reorient that little girl or little boy need to going back to the familiar, trying to get what we need, to someone who's not going to fix us, but someone who's going to hold our internal experience. And there's a very big difference with that transition. So when I experience this, someone holding your experiences doesn't feel quite as good as someone like fixing it and taking it away and giving you the illusion of safety. But someone holding it is helping you build a window of tolerance and the capacity for you to hold those parts of yourself, and them to hold those parts. And that's how we actually heal those parts. That's how we face them, we hold them, we heal them, versus going towards someone who we think we might be able to get the temporary relief from and maybe even re-injuring ourselves.
There's such a massive element here of trust and extending that trust and being okay with handing over a piece of yourself in that way for that other person to witness you. And then when they don't try to fix you, it's confusing for a moment, because generally people, their first instinct is now I have to fix this because I'm uncomfortable. And so when you find that person who's more securely attached and they can sit with you in that experience and they just allow it to be, and you sit in that moment of silence, there's actually this breakdown that occurs inside of you that you've never experienced before. And it's visceral, and it happens like in the diaphragm area of your abdomen. You can just feel like this flutter or this shake, and you get this release that happens within your body. And it's such an amazing experience when you have that opportunity in your lifetime to experience that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, Jason. I dive deep into the science of healing. And so many people talk about attachment in a different way, but like inner child work. But what you're describing is the science around when my nervous system is being received by someone else's nervous system who doesn't get dysregulated by my dysregulation and can hold space for me. I can dip into my implicit world. I can dip into my attachment wounds, and it can get intense, but I am experiencing someone holding those experiences with me. It's often what we didn't get from our parents, because often our parents didn't get it. They didn't have it to give, or they just wanted to fix us or make us more comfortable or tell us what to do. So when we start to receive that type of holding, it actually felt really uncomfortable for me for a while, actually, because it was so foreign to my nervous system. We also become more vulnerable, which that is another full layer of uncomfortability. Even for your anxious attachers, that's primarily where my nervous system sat. Getting vulnerable and having that deep space held actually was pushing me to face what I was avoiding within myself. So it's an amazing scientific experience that we can show that our nervous systems are connected, and in the right relationships, we can go there and do the deep healing. And it's very foreign for most people.
And then after a little bit of time, there's also a confidence that comes with that you can now go out into the world and provide yourself with these experiences, because you do have that anchor in your life. And again, you've been witnessed. Now I'm not going to say there's no shame, but you're providing yourself with the self-compassion, which is the antidote to shame. So you're releasing so many different experiences and feelings that you might be having that's literally stopping you from living the life that you're capable of creating for yourself. And now you get to go out into the world and have a little bit more of those dreams that you have, or those wishes, prayers, and hopes, and bring those to fruition.
No, absolutely. I think that, yeah, it's hard to put it into words, like what you get. And again, I have that free video for your audience about how it feels inside your body from insecurity to security. I think that it can be work in the beginning and uncomfortable, but the fruits, what you're describing, like I know for me, I have so much more inner space. I have so much more freedom. I have the capacity to build so many more attachments, healthy attachments, and yeah, so much more choice in my life. I'm not driven by my fears or the illusion of safety, which I dive into. I'm able to face and meet these parts of myself and feel so much more expansive. And so when we're babies, and I talk about this in detail, we internalize our parents. We internalize every close person that we're close to. And if our parents didn't have a neuroception of safety, so if they weren't carrying enough safety in their nervous system and in their life to be emotionally attuned to us in the way that we need, we internalize anxious or avoidant parents, we internalize their anxiety, and we move around the world with less inner security. What SAFE teaches through anchors and re-experiencing is that we get to re-experience and internalize who we choose to now as adults. So we can pick more capable people and go through this process. And we are actually, through mirror neurons and resonance circuits, internalizing new people. And once that happens, you have to spend enough time in the presence of these people, but they become part of you. They become part of your inner security. And that's literally the definition of earned security. So our brains get to re-internalize more secure people now. And that process actually becomes part of our inner felt sense of safety. So because I've gone through that process, I feel safer in the world now. I was able to re-internalize more secure people, and therefore I am more secure.
You were on a podcast recently where the host asked, what do you think my attachment style is? And I'm curious because we've known each other for a little while now, but I don't think we've ever actually discussed this. What attachment style do you believe that I have based off of what you know?
So it's like I wrote anxiously attached, right? But in SAFE, I talk about something called the wheel of attachment. And I talk about myself, I primarily spent a lot of my life in anxious, but if I wasn't in anxious, I was in avoidant. And in some relationships, especially my last one, when he really shut down, I had pockets of disorganization. So I actually don't believe very few people have one attachment pattern. Very few. We have a combination of many, and we can show up, and I showed up even disorganized at heightened times in my relationship when my partner was shutting down or using substances to a degree where my nervous system was had nowhere to orient to. So I'm not a big believer in particularly putting people in a category, because it depends on what's going on in your inner world and your outer world. I would say that my default was anxiously attached. I'm more secure now. If I put myself in really dynamics that are not that safe, my disorganized or my avoidant or my anxious parts might get awakened, but I'm more determined, or I'm more able to pick safe people now and know who to gravitate towards. And so I would say for you, Jason, because anyone in the field of attachment, to the degree that we are suffering in some ways, because our way of helping people is also our curiosity to this material, I think, is usually heavily linked to our own personal suffering and our own desire to understand so that we don't have to suffer more. So I would say that you have a mixture of anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, and probably some secure in there. And I wouldn't put you in any one category, but I'm sure you've felt disorganized. And for those of you who are listening, it's fearful avoidant. I'm sure you felt periods of that, because I think in order to do this passionately, I think some suffering within is part of why we become so curious and then want to help so many other people. But I could be wrong by that.
No, you're absolutely right. It's so interesting because our pain becomes our purpose. You get to this place where you've done so much work, you've read hundreds of books, you've gone to therapy, you've gotten a coach, you do all the things. And then you begin to recognize that actually our mission and purpose for each individual person is that as you grow, as you develop, as you expand, as you become who you were always meant to be, your job is to then teach other people how to do exactly the things that you have done in your own life. And oftentimes we speak of it more from a sphere of influence. So you're doing it within the people that are in your life, right? That connection point. Not everybody is going to have a podcast and speak to millions of people. You might be, and this is the most impactful, in your own life, helping the people that you can give this information to, and then just show them what is possible for them by being more of who you are.
Absolutely. And I can openly admit this. I wrote anxiously attached. I was in a relationship. I was doing a lot of my own work. And I was one of those people that I was fascinated, and my partner at the time didn't want to continue to do his own work at a certain point, and I had to continue to do my own work. And I very much believe for you who are listening that you can heal in a relationship, but you need both people to heal. And I feel like I'm really on the other side of so many things. But I am one of those people that's like, I want to study it. I want to understand everything of it. And I thought that would bypass the work. And it absolutely did not. Like, I still had my own journey, which I am very vulnerable about and safe. I still had all of my own attachment wounds to heal. And I'm a professional and I understand the science. And we still need to go on that healing path and journey no matter where we are.
I think you just touched on something really important there. A lot of times we put our therapist up on a pedestal and we think that they have everything figured out in life. And we forget that they are also a human and they are challenged and they spend their hours taking on other people's trauma and experiences. And that can be extremely dysregulating. And then you're expected to go live the rest of your life with the people that you love and that you hold dear. And of course, these things are going to pop up in your real life. And of course, things that you thought that you healed 10 years ago are going to pop up 10 years later in an experience that you're having. And you're going to think, man, I thought I took care of this already. But I think that's a very common experience that people have. It's more of a capacity issue that you've now developed the capacity to acknowledge and recognize what's happening in front of you. And so you spend less time in this dysregulated state because now you have a lot of the tools and skills and abilities. You understand the power of the pause to step back and pull yourself out for a second and give yourself that time and opportunity to regulate yourself. But it doesn't mean that you don't find yourself in that dysregulated state.
No, absolutely. In SAFE, I talk about losing a relationship. I think as a therapist, as someone who is more anxiously, our way to stay close is that we regulate and help people. So it's like the perfect occupation for anyone who has a baseline of anxiously attached. But as I was going through deep implicit attachment healing, there was quite a period of time where I had to actually work less and be more of the client and receive that kind of support and holding from others. And it was very uncomfortable for me to like really switch positions, but it was so important for me. And I couldn't see as many clients. There was a period where I couldn't see as many clients because my own healing needed to be held more and then my ability to hold others. And so there is that piece of that. When you go through your own healing, you need to also know where your capacity is. And you need to get out of the helping position and more into the receiving position, which was very hard for me because I'm a helper.
I can't thank you enough for sharing that part of your story, both as an individual and a professional, because a lot of therapists do listen to this podcast. And I think it's really helpful for them to hear that it is okay to pull back, to step back, and to make yourself a priority once again in the moments where you feel like maybe you can't.
Wow. And you know what? It's like I had the safety of I have an apartment that I was able to afford. I have a team of therapists who work for me, and I had an amazing anchor. I had a couple amazing anchors. When the safety really came, like I took myself out of an environment that was not meeting my needs, and I put myself in this environment, and I had safe people, and I had a safe environment. That's actually when my embedded trauma, my work showed up the most. And I remember telling one of my anchors, I'm getting really dysregulated, but it's a time in my life where I need to attend to what's going on inside rather than my workaholism, which was my protector mine, or like I had to start to really pay attention to what no one else slowed down and paid enough attention. I had to prioritize the fact that I needed to fall apart a little bit and give myself the space. And I could only do that because I wasn't in survival mode. And I talk about the hemispheres of the brain and being in survival mode and how a lot of us are in survival mode, but I was out of survival mode, finally in a very safe environment with the right support. And then that's when more of my embedded trauma surfaced. And if you understand the science, the safer we feel, the more our inherent blueprint to healing is going to happen, the more our neural nets open, the more we can get into touch with our earlier experiences. Yeah, that was part of my journey. And it was extremely humbling because I had wrote anxiously attached. I was in a loving relationship and I didn't know I had so much more work to do.
Also, the process of writing a book will open you up and to a lot of your triggers as you're going through that process. I have a lot of friends that have now stepped into that arena of writing books, and we have these conversations where they're working on a specific chapter and they're like, all these things are popping up for me. How did you navigate that experience for yourself as you're laying words onto a page?
Writing it wasn't that hard, but I'm dyslexic, but also working on the audiobook. So I had spent a couple
Whole other
months.
skill set.
Yeah, I spent a couple months working with a narration coach, but as I worked on the audio, which I don't think it's my strength, but I really wanted to do it. I really want to be the voice. I really want to be your anchor when you're listening to my book. But it was a little bit like taking me back into the implicit, taking me back into some memories. And just yesterday, because I just now, like a few weeks ago, but I'm listening to now, I just now received the audio early. And for those of you who are listening, you probably can get it right now because of when this will be released. But I was listening to the 5 minutes that you get for free when when you want to buy the book, but you haven't bought the book
Preview.
yet. And I was walking yesterday and literally tears coming out of my eyes. And I'm like, so you just have to re-experience some of these things over and over again. And when it really resonates with your story and your pain and what you've walked through, it's so cathartic. And I also feel, for those of you listening that are writing a book, that I was in it and then I processed it and I did the audio, which was really hard. And even though it still touches me, I feel like I'm like on the other side of it now. Like it's a way to make sense of what I went through. It's a way to make sense of my attachment journey. And this is no personal. And I feel like I've processed it for the most part. At this point, it's still touching me if I'm crying yesterday, but it was like an important part of my healing process, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I'm really proud of you for doing the Audible version and not having somebody else do it for you. It makes for just a completely different experience when the author reads their own book because you can hear the emotion behind the words. And it's just, you want to be that anchor. That is exactly how you do it. And so you're connecting with everybody that is listening through that auditory experience. And it literally can feel like home as you're listening to the Audible. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that was so important for me. And if you're listening, that is so hard for me. And I provide people, I did it with Anxiously Attached, but I provide people who buy Safe with the thematic meditations separate. So I re-record them slower. So I'm like, oh, it'd be so weird if someone read my book and then they came to the meditations and it wasn't my voice. Like it all needed to be from me. And yet it was like it was probably the hardest part of the whole book. For me, that was the hardest part.
And hopefully, as you were looking back on that and you had the tears coming down your face, there was also a little bit of celebration there and anchoring in for yourself, just how much you've accomplished and what you've done and just the amount of people that this book is going to impact. It's very profound to think about.
Yeah. It's also like great because I like disclose so much of my own life. And as a professional, I tried to disclose enough so that as the reader, I've been through it, but not too much. And I think it's like I have to put myself out there all over again. So there's like a vulnerability piece and a scary piece, but also an excitement because I think I know with Anxiously Attached, people came to me and they were just really happy that I wasn't the professional, that I was the human. And I think it's really important that the science is there. Like it's legit. It's there for you. And my humanness is, dude, I've been through this. Like I've suffered too. Like I want you to know that like I am not like this person hiding behind my degree I'm a human who's been through it. And maybe that will help you walk through it a little bit more.
I'm going to backtrack for a quick second just because I love this so much. Initially, you talked about attachment as being on that spectrum, and then you've now created the wheel of attachment. And I think that's really important for people to focus on and hone in on because we get really attached to the labels that we give to ourselves or that we've acquired through the pathology of going to therapy. And we put them all over ourselves, and that can leave us feeling very stuck in a particular way of being. Do we have to be there? Do we have to be stuck with all these labels?
Yeah. If you're listening and you buy the book, there's a downloadable PDF that says Beyond the Labels, and I will try to explain it on this podcast right now. But if you're not looking at the visual, you might need to have a visual, okay? So let's say a wheel is a circle, but let's call it's like a circle square. At the bottom is security. At the top is disorganization. At the right is anxious. At the left is avoidant. So you have all four. So let's say, for example, in the book, you do early wheel and then you do later wheel. But let's say with my mom, I had periods of security and then she was also anxious a little bit. So I would slide on the wheel, right? And maybe she was even avoidant at times. As you move up the wheel on the right side and anxiety and anxiousness increases to violence or rage or total dysregulation, you move into disorganization. As you move up the left side, as you move into a little bit avoidance, so let's say you have a father who's a little bit of avoidant or a mother who's a little bit more left shifted. As they detach more and you get to like neglect in extremes, you move into disorganization. So with one parent and in one household, you can have different experiences with every single quadrant. So it's never just usually one. Like you can have a parent who was abusive, who was also had secure moments. You can have a parent that was very avoidant that sometimes dipped into so much neglect that you tipped into disorganization. So the wheel is like a new way to look at attachment on a continuum. And in the book, you really explore this. So it's not this left shifted, we fit into these categories. We actually slide through many relationships. So once you start to understand, oh my God, in my childhood home, this is with my mother, this happened with my father, you can start to see the nuances. And then you take that same wheel and you place it over your current relationships. So you can start to look at what patterns are repeating in your present life. But the wheel is so important. I didn't create the wheel. My mentor, Bonnie Badenoch, who's also part of the freebie, she created the wheel and it's brilliant. And when you really start, like if you're listening and you're like an attachment nerd, if you can really start to take in what this wheel really is about, you will start to look at attachment from a completely different lens, so much more nuanced, so much more holistic. You will not see it as this linear thing that you fit in. You will start to understand that you move very much on this wheel, and we all do.
I believe that it shifts you to a true version of empathy when you have this understanding. There's a lot of performative empathy out there, and I won't go any deeper than that on that, but you find yourself, again, it's part of that stepping back and evaluating the experiences that you've had with the adult language and capacities and understanding and knowledge and earned wisdom. It's a completely different outlook. And so you view people very differently. I'm going to bring social media into this for a second because I tend to post a lot of memes, and I post the memes because I want to bring in something that is very relatable. And then in the caption, which people don't often read, is a lot of other information that you're going to find helpful to understand that particular experience of the meme. But then when you dive into the comments section, and this is mostly people who have identified with that anxious attachment, they are completely annihilating the avoidant in the comments section. They often mistake it for narcissism. And so we find that happening, and it's like you are completely giving your power away to something that is external to you. And it's why I focus so much on learning how to pull your personal power back away from the things that you give it away to so freely. And understanding that wheel of attachment is going to be a huge piece to you learning to take that personal power back away from those things.
Yeah. And in the book, I talk about avoidance and like being less shifted and being truly avoidant are people who were born with parents who were more left shifted and really avoidant. And if we're not mirrored and reflected and we don't have the emotional attunement when we're young, we don't build the circuitry for empathy and emotional attunement as adults. So it's not to say that I'm giving them an out. It's to say that healing for those anxious people who are listening to me right now is about learning who to go to with your emotional issues and your healing and who to not turn to because they literally don't have the neural wiring or capacity to hold this part of you and to stay present because of their trauma and their history. And so a big game changer for me was to not be hard on the emotionally unavailable person. While I get it, it's also to understand why they're emotionally unavailable and to reorient towards people who actually have the capacity. That was a huge game changer for me. And so we can be frustrated all we want at avoidant people, but they literally don't have the capacity to meet these parts of ourselves. And so we need to learn to have boundaries or learn to know who to turn towards. And so that's our familiar. So if you're going to that unavailable person, and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, it's a reorienting towards, I have to take this dysregulation and this pain and this fear towards people who have the capacity. And that is the game changer for people who are anxiously attached, because now we have a chance of holding it and healing it rather than re-injuring it.
It always turns into, in the comments section, I don't want any of those other people. I'm not attracted to them. I want this one. I want to fix or change or develop or turn this person. So we're constantly trying to get someone to be something that, again, as you just said, they may not have the capacity or even the desire to be.
Listen, I can totally empathize with that.
Yeah.
I love someone so deeply, and my only wish was that they would do the healing journey as well, because I really just wanted to move through this journey. And I remember telling them, like, why can't you heal? Why can't you do the work? And they were like, what is the work? But the thing is, if you are so focused, and I talk about this in chapter 7, and so enmeshed and so attuned to somebody else's inner child and their wounding and their story, you are trying to save their inner child, but you're also in avoidance of your own inner work. So by focusing on them, you are protectively escaping your own journey. And so sometimes that's a safer place to be. Sometimes the illusion of, I'm going to focus on you, Jason, who's chaotic, and I want to help you. And I've had these experiences with you where you have met my needs. So I'm just going to tie on to that and continue to focus on getting you back to me, is a way for me to stay in dopamine. It's a way for me to stay in fantasy. It's a way for me to stay in pursuit. And it's a way for me not to be with, wow, Jason, you're really not capable. And my abandonment wounds are showing up. And my abandonment wounds actually trace back to this origin and maybe another person who was incapable. And I don't know how to be with that. So I would rather put my attention outward and try to focus on you, because being there is just too hard. And I don't have the safety or the awareness of how to hold the original wound.
It's so funny. As you're saying that, I'm sitting here thinking of the Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme where the guy's standing there and he's got all these connection points up on the wall and he's a little bit wired. And as you're speaking, it's just like the neuroscience and then the embodiment and the somatics. All of this can feel extremely overwhelming and difficult when you're first taking it all in and you try to make all these connection points in your life. Is there a way that we can start to simplify this for ourselves when we get to that place of feeling overwhelmed with it all?
Yeah, I think too, like, I'm speaking on all these podcasts and it is a lot and it's deep and it's heavy. I want to share, like, I've done my own work, and the point of doing your work, first of all, I want you guys to have the information. So that's why I wrote the book. But the point of this work and somatic work in general and healing is that we go as slowly as we need to go. This is not about pushing you into the depths of annihilation or abandonment or any of that. This is about giving you the information and your own inherent wisdom of doing this work in the pace that you need to do this work, and that not doing it any sooner than your system feels ready, and that we get to really go slowly. Like, it would be just like a disservice if I was like pushing people into their work. I think getting the information or even just reading the book will awaken, and hopefully the path forward and what you need to heal will be very obvious for you, because that's why I wrote the book. But the journey itself, you do in your own pace, on your own time, when you feel called to and when you're ready. And that is not something that you and I can tell a person. Like, I couldn't tell my past partner, do the work now because you're ready. Nothing, like, his system, he was doing a lot of work. And at one point it overwhelmed his system and I don't want to go there anymore. And so we have to be forgiving, or we have to allow people to go at their own pace. And I think for anxiously attached folks, we always want the avoidant person to do the work. And I think the more we want them to do the work, the less they want to do the work. And I think the way to reorient that is we start to do our own work. And that usually shifts the dynamic of the relationship in general, and actually can save the relationship when we focus less on them doing the work and we turn inward and we do our own work.
Yeah, you hear that, everybody? I repeat that over and over again. It really does start with you. It starts with the individual you. And I repeat this phrase over and over again. I want people to learn to know and trust themselves. when you do, you become more capable, competent, and confident with who you are as a person and your place in this world. And in that place, you step into that level of confidence that allows you to navigate things in a way that you feel strong, you feel capable, and things aren't as overwhelming. You don't take so much personally, and you recognize that some things do belong to other people and you don't have to take that on.
Absolutely. And if you don't know or trust yourself, there's a good chance that you weren't in a dynamic that was reflective of enough of your inner world and what was going on with you to inherently know and trust yourself. So we have to re-experience people who like us, who help us develop our trust, who mirror us, who help us figure out what's going on inside of us so we can develop our own capacity to get to that level of confidence.
Now, is there a question that I didn't ask you today that you wish that I would have?
Not really. I like that this interview was different than a lot of them because I got more personal in this interview, which was cool. But no, I can't think of a question you didn't ask.
And for the people that are picking up Safe for the first time, I want to acknowledge this. It's okay to get the book and then put it on your coffee table. And maybe you don't touch it the first week and it might take you 30 days. I'm one of those people that I get stuff and then it sits because I'm just not prepared to step into it. But like anything else, just take it in pages, right? So it's like start small, little bites as you go along, get a notebook and a pen and be prepared to write things down as it comes to you. It's such a powerful exercise to intentionally read in that way and to write things out as you're going through it. And then, of course, that gives you some good notes to take along to your coach or therapist as well.
Absolutely. And this book, I'm sure some people are going to sit down and read it, but like this book is meant to be a companion. So it's actually written from the right hemisphere. So it's in relationship with you. It's going to waken up a little. It should maybe touch some things in you, but it's not meant to be like this one and done. I really want therapists and coaches and anchors to use it together to be like a companion. And I think it's just going to be one of those reads that you might read one day and then 3 months you might go back and reread, or you might bring it to your therapist. That's my biggest hope, is that therapists start using it as a tool and that it starts to speak to you. But yeah, we'll see how it lands. It's definitely different than fix yourself in these 3 steps and this is where you fall. It's let's feel into all of this. So I hope when you're reading it, you feel incredibly supported. I can talk about the free gifts if you want me to.
Tell us about it.
So those for you who download today, there's a link that I'm sending to Jason today. That one is Beyond the Labels. So it's the wheel of attachment you'll get in your inbox immediately. Check your spam. And that's important for you to know. And then the other is like a 40-minute conversation between me and my mentor, Bonnie Badenoch. She actually invented the wheel. And we talk about what it feels like in your body to move from insecurity to security. And I think it's a cool conversation because I think as you're doing the work, you want to know about what's the outcome? What can I feel like when I start to feel really internally secure? So those are, and she's so important to me. For those of you who are listening, she's the person who teaches us therapists. Like she's a mentor of the mentors. She's 82. She's so wise. So many of us therapists go to her to learn interpersonal neurobiology. She helped me with the book. And she's one of my anchors. I wanted you guys as the public to experience her. So those are the 2 things that I'm giving away for free. There might be a meditation too, I'm not sure. But if you order the book today and fill out the form, you will get those 2 free gifts that are important to me and important that you guys have that wheel right away.
And of course, all of this is going to be linked in the show notes, guys. So be sure to check that out and get your copy of Safe. It's going to be out on October 28th. This episode will come out just a little bit before then. And be sure to leave a rating and a review and let us know what you thought about this episode and what you think of the book. Jessica, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to connect again and to talk about everything that we shared today. So thank you.
Thank you for being such a good interviewer. And I'm glad that we went to the places that we went. And I look forward to working with you again in a couple of months. Let's connect.
Of course. That is my last question. What is next for you? Have you even had the time to think about that?
I have an idea of what's next, but it's so in the early phases that I'm not even sure I'm ready to share it. So there is something percolating for sure, but it's also so important that I stay present like through this. It's been 3 years between Anxiously Attached and Safe, and there was a whole year of nothing and just healing. before I even started to conjure up what safe would be. But I do have something percolating in my mind. But it's so early that it's not worth even mentioning at this point.
Just know that we all look forward to seeing what's next. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.